Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for the warm welcome. Yes, we can see the slides. Fantastic. So, I am honored to deliver the keynote for this fantastic event. And the title of this keynote is, Do we get stuff done? We don't get stuff done. Or do we? Or will we? Maybe soon. My name is Mario, and I'm a self-proclaimed ex-researcher and now a lecturer for the Rural University in Bochum. I also created a company in Berlin that is called Q53, and we do pen tests, and I wrote a couple of books, a couple of papers, maintain a couple of projects. And if you feel the need to reach out to me, then you can do so using the contact info below. Welcome, everybody. Finally, another NullCon that is not a remote conference. Not the first NullCon that is not a remote conference past the pandemics, but the second one, because as mentioned, we had one in Berlin already. It was a way smaller event, but still fantastic. And I was thinking, how many years did we actually wait for this to happen? Like, for me, it was like 2 years, 3 years at least. And for me, this is like the first actual travel that I did in a long time that was like across continents to view another conference. And I am very excited to be here. I would like to talk a little bit about the talk structure that I have planned for today. We have two acts. The first act is we don't really get stuff done, in which I will speak about how in cybersecurity we don't really get anything done. I mean, we get some things done, but certain things we just don't get done, and we keep beating around the bush, and it might be that we could do a little bit better in some regards. And in the second act of this talk, I will talk about how we might soon get stuff done, because I sense a change in paradigms in several areas, in several realms, and I have a good feeling about this, and I'm more optimistic about that than I was a couple of years ago. So let's see what this will bring for us. First of all, the talk title involves the word we, and we need to clarify on what does that actually mean. Who is we? As mentioned, I'm coming from the web security company, so I can mostly speak on behalf of that community. I do not know if we get stuff done in the hardware community. In other communities, probably you do. But on behalf of the web security community, I can safely say we don't really get too much stuff done, and that sometimes makes me a little bit sad. But, as mentioned as well, I'm also optimistic about the current trends, and I want to showcase some of them to you. First of all, I want to dive into the past. And I want to go way back in the past and talk about times when people also didn't get stuff done, but then some other people basically rose up and managed to kind of do something that was fundamentally important, groundbreaking, and got us to the point of really getting stuff done. The first person I would like to talk about is this gentleman here. Does anyone perchance know who that is? Anyone has any idea who that is? That is Edward Jenner. He's known as the father of vaccination. His idea back then was, when seeing that lots of people starved from catching and contracting smallpox, that it might be interesting to try something that no one has tried before. He saw a relation between smallpox and cowpox. And he thought, well, maybe if we give people cowpox, which was a way more harmless variant of smallpox, and maybe if their bodies adjust to that, maybe then they won't get smallpox. And believe it or not, that crazy idea just worked. So his work effectively saved more lives than the work of any other human. That is what some people say, and I think they're right, because he effectively invented the concept of vaccination. He basically gave people a harmless disease to make sure that they couldn't catch a bad disease, because their body then was already prepared. A crazy idea back then, revolutionary, and savior of a million lives as a consequence. Here's a small quiz question. Does anyone here know what the word vaccine actually means? Anyone has any idea what the word vaccine means? I didn't know before preparing this talk, and I was baffled. The word vaccine means cow, because the idea was to take cowpox to prevent smallpox, so he gave people a cow disease, and the process thereof was called vaccination, and vaccine means cow. Look it up. So every time you get vaccinated, you actually get cowed, but hey, I'm pretty sure you didn't want to know that, right? All right, so what I'm trying to point out is here, he had a fundamentally groundbreaking, revolutionary idea with tremendous positive consequences. He did something that no one did before, and it worked. Does anyone know who that person is? Any idea? Well, this person, and I'm having a little bit of a trouble to pronounce his name properly, is Ignaz Philipp Semmelweis. He is today known as the savior of mothers. He basically invented another revolutionary thing that no one would ever think of, and that is washing your hands. So he came up with the idea of saying, well, lots of women who are giving birth to their children at the hospital die after being, well, helped by the doctors. And then he found out that those doctors, before helping those women giving birth, were actually working on dead bodies to kind of study the human anatomy. It's a little bit unappetizing. I hope you're having breakfast already. But he basically found out that there might be a correlation between mothers dying and before that, doctors working on dead bodies. And he recommended to people, please, just wash your hands before you help those women. And it worked. His work saved millions of lives, millions of mothers. And, well, despite that simple trick that he came up with, he was mocked by his community and declared insane. His story is actually tragic because he was put in a mental ward. And then allegedly, the people in the mental ward beat him to death. So he died a tragic death, and his work was not really valued by anyone at the time until people figured out that what he did actually reproduced and indeed had the desired effect. More people would survive. Has anyone ever heard of this lady? Anyone? This is Rachel Louise Carson. She is known publicly as the savior of the environment as we know this today, because she was the one who actually made the topic of environmentalism popular, predominantly in the US and from there all over the world. And her work, as you can imagine, was hated by the chemical industry, by the chemical companies, because she came up with the idea that certain chemistry and certain fertilizers actually go into the groundwater and do tremendously bad things to people around. And she basically was the one who put her life energy into enforcing or managing the enforcement of those chemicals to be forbidden and to no longer be used by companies, by farmers, and so on, and thereby saved tons of lives and the environment, and is basically also the reason why the United States right now have the US Environmental Protection Agency. And of course, her work wasn't really greeted with much empathy and sympathy back then, and her enemies, as usual in this particular area, would like to try to silence her by basically saying, well, she is just amateurish and emotional, don't listen to her. But without her, we wouldn't be where we are right now. Now, we want to move forward a little bit in history and have a look at this person. Do you know who this person is? You might know who this person is if you're, for example, one of the sponsors. That, ladies and gentlemen, is Mike West. He essentially co-invented the topic of same-site cookies, which is a very simple yet extremely efficient technology to effectively eliminate an entire attack class. He had the idea of saying, well, look, we have CSRF, cross-site request forgery, which is a major topic in web security, and one of the fundamental flaws in HTTP and how websites work. And well, we couldn't get rid of that issue for the past 15 to 20 years, had it not been for him. Inventing one single additional cookie flag that you would be able to set on your own, in your browser for your web applications, that would basically prevent the entire attack pattern of CSRF from working. And it was working so well that Google and also later on Firefox and the other browser vendors decided to say, well, let's just turn this thing on by default to make sure that whatever happens, unless you deactivate it purposefully, your website and your users are safe from CSRF attacks. And by that minor change, by that seemingly small change, he literally eliminated an entire attack class and saved millions of users from getting their accounts stolen, getting their data stolen, or worse happening. I hope there is no tragic story attached to him. I hope he's fine. I'm not sure, is he perchance here or anyone who knows him? Well, anyway, Mike, if you're here, I hope you're fine. And if you're not here, I hope you're fine as well, of course. And now with that small excursion in history, I would like to introduce the second act. And I would talk more about the present, where we are right now, and, well, where hopefully we all wash our hands. In the year 2022, where we are right now, we did overcome a couple of problems from the past. We did, for example, effectively learn, maybe also just recently, that washing your hands will in fact prevent sickness. So we overcame that problem. We learned about basic hygiene, and it's quite rare that in a hospital you would have problems from lack of hygiene. And we also learned this for our lives at home to make sure that we kind of have a little bit of a positive impact on how the pandemic spread and that it doesn't spread too much. We also overcame, as mentioned through the work of Mike, the problem of cross-site request forgery. Like, this problem is literally more or less done. As a pen tester running a pen test company, CSRF issues are something that I don't really see anymore in our reports because Mike did it. Mike basically saved us from that. That no longer exists. I wish we would see the same with different bug classes, but we don't yet, which is getting us to the topic of we're not really yet getting stuff done. We also more or less overcame the fear of vaccination that was haunting the people back then in Aprogener's age, but, well, not for everybody, as you can imagine, but mostly we overcame the fear of vaccination. So, hey, that is progress, no? But there's also a bunch of problems that we have not yet overcome. So if you take too much soda, we still very loudly, we haven't overcome the problem of SQL injection, and we have not yet overcome the problem of cross-site scripting. So there's a bunch of problems that we have not yet managed to overcome, although they are quite trivial and technically quite easy to solve, yet we're still struggling. And I wonder why that is. And I wonder what we can do. And I wonder maybe this event might be one of the first steps to actually get in the right direction of really overcoming those problems and not keeping to put patches on a broken leg. That thing with SQL injection, and I think you probably all know the basics of SQL injection, that is so crazy. And I do not understand why we can't manage to overcome this problem, because the topic itself is just so simple. This gentleman here was well known around back then as someone labeled as RFP, Rainforest Puppy. That guy created an article that was published in Frag back then, I think it was Frag issue 46, and he basically said, well, I found out that in web applications that have a database underneath, it is oftentimes quite simple to take user input and with that influence the actual query that is being sent to the database. Basically something like that. We have an SQL query, we select something from the user table, and then user input goes into that query, and then we can select more than we would have selected otherwise, and thereby we gain information leakage or worse. That is not complicated, right? That is very, very simple. Something from a source goes into a sink, and then we can do different things. We can manipulate what the machine does. Yet people looked at this at the time, and they were mind blown. Like, how is that possible? That is insane. We cannot understand this. Jeff, or Rainforest Puppy, was confused, because he himself thought that this is kind of an easy problem with kind of an easy solution. Just don't do this anymore or do something against it to kind of treat this securely. Yet people did not comprehend this. Their mindset was not yet ready. He was then receiving gazillions of requests for consulting, and he traveled around the country in the States, and he would receive insane daily rates, like daily rates up to $7,000 just to come to a company and explain to them what is happening here. What can we do against this, chef? Please help us. He was like, you just escaped the input and then you're good? Yes, but it's so hard. Please help us to understand this. So people just didn't get it done. And that happened many, many years ago. And we still don't get it done. We still sit in front of this and wonder, what is happening? How can we fix this? Why do we have this problem? What can be done? There is countless countermeasures against this. But we still in pen tests find so many SQL injections that it's really confusing us to a point of not understanding what we're actually doing here. How can we not get this fixed? Another thing would be cross-site scripting, one of my personal favorites in the realm of web security, which was discovered by two gentlemen called Marvin Simkin and Toby Barrick, back then working for a credit card company. There's a little bit of a debate on who actually invented cross-site scripting, who discovered it, but the lore points straight in their direction, and there's some documentation that proves that. And they initially didn't even call it cross-site scripting, because the name cross-site scripting is very, very wrong for this kinds of attack. They called it properly as it should be called JavaScript injection, because that's what you do. Then it got rebranded and re-researched by Microsoft, and they more or less created a small poll and were wondering, like, how should we actually call it? How can we call it? And at some point, the consensus was there to call it CSS, cross-site scripting. And then someone said, we have that already. It's cascading style sheets. Oh, okay, then it's called cross-site scripting, XSS. And then the term was born, and everybody loved it so much because it went easy off the tongue. And, well, it's still the wrong name, but hey, we also still didn't solve it. And it's also not hard. I mean, that's all that there's to it. This is a simple cross-site scripting vulnerability as we see it every single day. Every single day, 20 years later, it's still around. We have some HTML, we have some beautiful PHP where the username variable coming from the get parameter array goes right into the code, is being outputted without filtering, and boom, there you go. Just put in some HTML, just put in some JavaScript, and that's all you have to do. Yet we can't get it done, we can't get it fixed. All that would have to be done is A, maybe encode this a little bit, or B, enable a system or use a system that prevents this by default. And I think that is where the problem is. We don't have anything that kind of prevents this by default. And if we have it, we don't use it. So, looking at those two items, and I think we can come up with various other items that point in the same direction, we seemingly fail to get stuff done. We have ancient bugs that are as simple as they can be, but we can't get them fixed. We can't basically arrive at the point where we did arrive with CSRF, just getting it done with one simple setting. We failed so far to get it under control. And the consequences are tremendous. We see financial loss, we see reputational loss, data theft, information leaks, and it's really, really bad. Like the consequences of process scripting and SQL injection combined cost billions of US dollars or rupees or whatever currency you take. It's a lot of money that goes down the drain. So we tend to think, well, washing our hands when in a hospital, that's cool, but washing our hands when writing our code, no, that's not for us. And anyone forcing us to use soap, no, we won't let that happen either. We're going to write our code as we see it fit. And I think that is getting us closer to the actual problem. It took us more than 20 years to arrive here and realize, hey, has it really been 20 years that we've been plagued with SQL injection and cross-site scripting and nothing got fixed? That is crazy. Because we have a lot of brilliant people here, security engineers, developers, system administrators, professors and postdoctors, browser vendors, specifiers, policymakers, and everybody else, we all failed to get it done. Nothing. There was a bunch of attempts that we undertook to kind of get it done. Content security policy is one that I could think about. HTTP-only cookies is another thing that I could think about, but none of them actually fixed the problem. It was all just additional patches on an already broken leg. And I'm wondering, how can we finally get it done? How can we get to the point of finally doing the right thing and no longer put patches on the leg, but basically think about how can we address the issue so we can eliminate the bug class and not the individual vulnerabilities? Over the past 20 years, we have been dealing effectively with voluntary hand washing. We had the choice to wash our hands. But we also had the choice not to do this, and sometimes under pressure, deadline pressure, financial pressure, and so on, we just choose not to do this. And the consequence is a vulnerability, and the consequence of the vulnerability is usually damage for someone else. And I say, let's no longer do this. Let's no longer follow this voluntary approach. We tried this for 20 years and it's not working. Let us rather work on new and fresh ideas that make the vulnerability as such impossible by design. And we can do this, and we're pretty much on the way to do so, we're just not there yet. And I'm going to show you 3 examples where it already happened. The first one, we've already discussed. That was Mike, with the same set cookies, where he basically said, okay, we need something that makes CSRF impossible. What is the key, the root cause of the problem with CSRF? It is HTTP, its statelessness, and the fact that cookies are being sent along with every subsequent request once they have been set. So he said, well, let's make sure that cookies are only being sent along with actual requests and none of the background requests that the user might not notice or see. Minor change, but massive effect. And then it worked so well that basically the browser vendors decided to say, well, let's enforce this. Let's just put it in all browsers by default. So let's take away the choice from framework maintainers and developers to turn this on, but leave them the choice to turn it off. So it's on by default, secure by default. That is the magic. Another system I would like to talk about is trusted types. And another system that I would like to talk about is element.setHTML. The first you know already. It's basically an on by default, just deal with it security mechanism. It was rolled out. It was announced to be rolled out, then it happened, then people of course complained, then people realized that they have to fix their web applications, and then they fixed the web applications, and now it's there, and CSRF is gone, pretty much. Not 100%, but we reduced the attack surface so dramatically that we don't even notice it anymore. No more CSRF, which is fantastic. With trusted types, built by a friend of mine over at Google, Krzysztof, we follow the same approach. He was about to tackle the topic of DOM XSS, which is something that we also just cannot get done because it's such a massive beast. And he realized the only thing how we can get it done is make it impossible. by basically making sure that people can't exploit it anymore and developers can't build insecure web applications any longer. By taking away all those risky sinks where potentially bad content could go into. And forcing the browser to say, no, I'm no longer accepting this. I'm no longer accepting a string going into inner HTML. I'm no longer accepting a string going into location href, and I'm no longer accepting a string going into any other risky sink. The browser says no. All you need to do is set one header, and I hope that this might be default at some point as well, but with one header you can turn all that off. And what you would have to do to repair your web application to be compatible with that change is relatively small in effort. Write a policy, manipulate the string object a little bit, or kind of add some extra code to the risky sources, and then you're gonna be good. A comparably small change for a massive effect, again, with the chance of eliminating an entire attack class just in one go. No more DOM XSS. We can get there. We're almost there. We have the technical tools. We just need to apply them now. And the third would be element set HTML. When I started working on a client-side sanitizer in the year 2014, I never thought it would be going thus far. The sanitizer I'm maintaining is called DOM Purifier, you might know it, and right now we have the situation that it's one person maintaining this, and that's me. If I turn rogue, if I turn decapacitate or anything like this, we would have a problem. 13 million people per month downloading this software would have a problem. So my decision was, this can't be maintained by me, we need to find a way, and then I basically was lobbying for this to be done by the browser itself. But then we made a quantum leap with the collaboration with Freddie and with Daniel from Google, and we arrived at the point of saying, like, look, you know what? If we want to really tackle the problem, we must change HTML, we must change the standard. We must find a way how it's impossible for developers to create XSS vulnerabilities in the DOM. We must take away that attack surface without them even noticing by giving them something that is, again, secure by default. What we have right now is exactly that. In the olden days, you would assign HTML to an element on a website by using the inner HTML property. You would say document body inner HTML is that kind of stuff that just came in. That's usually a plain old XSS. And that's bad, because there's no security precaution, there's nothing that prevents you from doing an error, from forgetting something, from not properly escaping. But we propose a new thing, and it's already implemented, you can play with that. What we have right now is no longer element.innerHTML, but a new method that is called element set HTML. It's already in Chrome, it's already in Firefox, and Firefox still behind a flag. I think in Chrome it's already fully rolled out. And you no longer have to use inner HTML. You no longer have to use that insecure property, because now you have set HTML. And whatever you throw into set HTML will automatically be sanitized. You can't have XSS. It's no longer possible. Unless you really want to and put in a configuration object that says, like, yeah, please re-enable XSS because I miss it so much. But I mean, come on, like by default, this is secure. And there's nothing that you have to do. Just develop code as you would do in the past, and you know you can't have a vulnerability. That is where we need to go. That is the goal that we need to kind of be after, to make sure that we have systems that allow us to do what we do without hassle and to almost forget about security because it's already baked in. This is what we have been missing in the past 20 years, at least in web security, but now we're slowly getting there. I issued a tweet a couple of weeks ago in the end of June, and that tweet was, well, it was a little bit provocative and it kind of stirred up some dust, and I basically said, bye-bye cross-site scripting, your time has finally come. In which I basically show the code that is necessary to kind of get rid of cross-site scripting, and also by the time the flags that needed to be activated in your browser to be able to actively play with this and experiment. And some people were like, oh, that's nice. Other people were like, yes, but. Some people were like, no, this is never going to work. And some people were actually outright angry. I'm not really sure why, but it was interesting to see the reactions, and it was also interesting to see the feedback that was coming in, the bugs that would be filed, the additional things that we overlooked, and I have the feeling that there is momentum and that things are moving in the right direction. And it is the same with trusted types. Also there is a lot of momentum. Browser vendors are picking it up, developers are picking it up, frameworks are picking it up, and I hope there's going to be more over time. So in a more general view on things, in a more general perspective on things, I want to see us get to the point of having no more voluntary hand washing. Hand washing when programming web applications or any applications must be baked into the framework. It must be impossible to not wash your hands, or it must be impossible to kind of get around those restrictions that are there. Dirty hands must at least be forbidden, or if possible, made impossible. And it's technically the same with SQL. Why do we still write our own queries in the year 2022? Why do we still go that deep into the stack as developers and write our own queries? We have all the tools that we don't have to write our own queries. We have ORM, we have frameworks, we have abstraction layers. Let's make sure that we can't write our own queries anymore, that this burden is being taken away from developers so they can actually work on the things that they like and can do well, instead of taking care of this tedious task that is so prone to creating vulnerabilities. No more sending of cookies with arbitrary requests. That we have already accomplished. Mike did this with the same site cookies, and it's amazing. It works. We have the proof right there. No more string assignments. We don't want strings anymore. Like, let's get rid of strings in web applications. And trusted types is the first step in that basic direction to say we cannot assign strings anymore, because strings mean parsing, and where there's parsing, there's bugs, and we don't want to have bugs. That's a good first step, and I hope it's going to work. And last but not least, of course, no more dirty usage of HTML. We don't want to have dirty HTML anymore, but we can't be expected to clean it up ourselves. Let the browser take care of this. Let the baked-in mechanisms take care of this, and let's make it impossible for dirty HTML to have impact on our web applications, because there's something that protects us, that prevents bad stuff from happening without us even spending a minute of thought on this. So, I think with that, I would really like to kind of see a new paradigm that basically supersedes the one from yesterday. The one from yesterday basically says, oh, there is an issue. Hey, let's go patch it. And that is not a good paradigm, because that is reactive and doesn't make any sense, and it basically ends up as something that is no longer scalable. We also have a paradigm today as a result from what we did in the past, and that is, oh dear, so many patches, so much work to do. Let's kind of invest more resources into security and more and more and more to kind of handle the huge pile of bugs that we're already sitting on. The backlog is growing and we can't do anything about this. That's another bad paradigm that I don't want to see anymore in the next 5 years. So the next paradigm that I think makes sense for us to consider and to research towards is there can't be any issues. There can't be any bugs. There is no way to create vulnerable web applications or other applications, and it is there by default. And only if we want to, we should be able to kind of work past those security mechanisms, but that must be a purposeful decision. Anything else must be secure by default. And as I said, slowly we're moving there, and slowly we're getting there, but it's still a long road, and it's still a couple of years until we're gonna be there. Maybe NullCon edition 2030 will have us talk about the topic differently, and I hope so, but I think it's still a couple of years. But it also depends a little bit on how we here at this conference and at future events approach this issue. I think our paradigm should be, let's stop investing into reactions only. I'm not saying let's stop investing into reactions entirely, because we still need to react to incidents. We still need to react to bad payload, to bad user input, and to cyber attacks, of course. But I would like to see us not to invest into that thing exclusively. And sometimes I have the feeling we do that. We need to invest more into something that is more forward-thinking, more future-safe. Let's invest less into soft prevention, into like, well, if something bad comes in, then the WAF triggers and the IDS triggers and there's a log entry and then we hope for the best. That's not the way to go. Of course, it helps a little bit, but it doesn't fix the issue. I think instead, we should max out on the idea of things being secure by default. We should utilize policies. The hands must be washed. Otherwise, you don't join the party. We should utilize smart designs. We should make a framework that allows us to say our hands can't be dirty, maybe by wearing gloves or something like this, you get the picture. And that's the most important part, deprioritize compatibility. Let's no longer be nice with old and bad code that should be fixed or deleted in the first place. No more bare hands, no more lack of hand washing. Basically, let's arrive at the point where all these issues would become impossible by design, enforced by the platform, enforced by the framework. So we don't have to think about this and we can't make mistakes anymore. To sum it up, I believe that at this point, looking at the history of web security for the past 20 years and even more in some regards, I don't think we can solve our long-lasting problems by putting more patches on the broken leg. We need to rethink the approach that we're taking. Patching over the past 20 years had its chance, and it worked to a certain degree, but it didn't solve the root causes of the problems that we're dealing with. So I think it's time to switch gears. We need to think about policy, about smarter designs, and about frameworks and programming languages and systems and runtimes that are secure by default. And that may be, I'm not saying it is, but that may be the only way forward from here on. And that may be the only way to get us to the point of saying like, well, we solved XSS, we solved SQL injection, we solved this, we solved that. Now what other challenges are there? Because there's still enough to be done for us. And that, of course, requires initiative and a certain degree of boldness. Let's be bold and work on new ideas. Let's not reinvent the wheel over and over and over again. We have done this in the past, and we've seen where this brought us. To a certain degree success, but never to the point of fixing the root cause and never to the point of fixing the actual problem. So I'm hoping that this talk inspired you a little bit to maybe think into a different direction with regards to information security. Maybe switch gears a little bit and think about this new paradigm. Maybe let it sink for a while, and then I would be very happy to hear from you about your feedback. And maybe, who knows, maybe the next great idea, something such as, for example, same-site cookies or trusted types and the likes, is born on this event. And maybe in a couple of months, we'll be discussing this and saying like, wow, that is amazing. That actually changes the world as it is for better. And yes, I hope that this talk gave you a little bit of inspiration. Again, I'm very grateful for having been here. A lot of shouts go out to the NullCon organizers. Thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity for this speech. Lots of shouts go out to Mike, to Krzysztof, to Freddy, and to Daniel, and to, of course, Internet Explorer and Wikipedia, where I took lots of the information from about the historic events in the past that were similar to what we discussed today. And thank you very much. Have a fantastic event. Thank you all, and see you soon.